Hey, and welcome to my channel. Having worked many years as a professional recruiter, I have acquired unique insights, advice, and perspectives that I hope can be helpful to you all. In this video, we're going to talk about exactly what equity is and whether or not you should go for a higher salary or more equity when applying for a new job. Before we get started, don't forget to click the like and subscribe button as it's completely free and really helps us kickstart this channel. Alright, let's talk about money here. Cash is great and we all love a good salary as it's predictable and consistent, but what if you have the opportunity to own a percentage of a company that just takes off like a rocket ship and ends up with an 8, 9, or the elusive 10-figure valuation, and your percent ownership could equate to multiple 5, 6, or even 7 figures or more? Well, unfortunately, it's not as easy and predictable as it sounds, because if it were, we would all be on a beautiful island somewhere right now, enjoying the sun and refreshing cocktails without any worry in our lives. When looking for a new job in the tech industry at a startup, it is very typical to receive a salary and equity with your offer. While salary is easy to calculate, you need to put some thought into whether or not the equity and the company you're thinking about joining could be a great choice for you. On the plus side, you could have a very fulfilling job, grow a ton, have tons of impact all over the business, and be comfortable to know that the value of your equity is rising as the startup continues to grow and do well in addition to a stable salary. On the other hand, if rushed prematurely, you could find yourself underpaid, overworked, and uncertain of yours and the company's future, and in this situation, on top of that, your equity's value could be minimal or even worth nothing after all of your hard work. So, before we continue, let's do a quick crash course on equity, what it is and why startups use and offer equity to attract talent. What is equity? Equity is typically the most confusing and intricate part of any compensation package. In the simplest terms, equity refers to the percent you own of the company. So the more equity you have and the more valuable a company gets, the more money essentially you could have. Without going too technical here, what is important to note though is that you're never given just equity. Instead, you're going to receive stock options, which are the options to purchase equity in the company at a heavily discounted price. And on top of that, rather than getting all of your options at once, up front, you'll typically get them over a 4-year period, which is known as a vesting schedule. How this works commonly is that you'll most likely get 1/4 of your options at the end of the first year, and then will receive 1/48 of your options every month after that. Once your options are available to vest, you can then purchase them if you want. You ever wondered why you always hear investors or people say that it's always better to invest or join a company early as opposed to when it's larger and more established from an equity point of view? Well, there is some truth to that. By joining a company early and because the perceived risk is higher, you'll often get the chance to receive more options at a much lower price to compensate for that extra risk than someone who joins after you. If the company gets bigger and less risky, anyone who joins them will typically receive fewer options at a higher price. Basically, the whole point in receiving equity is that one day the company you're working at goes through a liquidity event or an exit that is usually in the form of an IPO or acquisition, and that you'll walk away with a huge payday. For example, while the early employees at Instagram received an average profit of $8 million, there was also the popular story of a muralist who received options from Facebook back in the day that ended up being worth more than $200 million. Of course, this doesn't happen to everyone or often, but definitely adds to the appeal and excitement to working at a startup. Aside from stock options, equity can also come in different forms and types, from incentive stock options, non-statutory or non-qualified stock options, restricted stock awards, restricted stock units, but we won't go into them in this video. Why do companies offer equity? Now that we defined what equity is, why do startups offer it in the first place? If you're a particularly small and young startup, there is a high chance you're operating on a small and tight budget. Most young companies are either bootstrapped, meaning the founders are using their own cash to fund operations, or they have undergone one or a couple of small fundraising rounds through friends or family, or a seed round from accredited investors. So if that's the case, unless they have tons of money, how will they be able to attract, let alone hire, super high in demand talent like software engineers, marketers, product, and other professionals who on average are looking for at least 5 or 6 figures? There is only so much that ping pong tables, beer and kombucha on tap, and free lunches and dinners can do. That's why for most startups, aside from ping pong tables and the other office perks, offering a different form of compensation, more specifically through equity, can be a great way to attract, incentivize, and retain talent through their vesting schedule. Offering equity is a great way to make sure that everyone from the founders to the employees are aligned on one singular goal, which is to build a great company of immense value and to make sure that people would stick around long enough without utilizing too much of the company's cash. So we talked about what is equity and why companies offer equity, and now let's go over the pros and cons of salary versus equity. Salary compensation. Everyone loves cold hard cash. The great thing about salary is that it is given up front on a predictable and consistent basis. Salary compensation usually refers to the base pay you would receive based on an annual figure, and with most, you would know exactly how much you will receive every month and understand that the number will not be impacted based on the company's performance. It is the best form of payment to pay for rent, groceries, savings, or investing, as it's the most dependable form of payment. There is no hard and fast rule on how you get paid, as it can depend on so many different factors, from how experienced you are, what type or size of company you're working at, what industry you're in, what your role is, etc. Typically in the tech industry, the younger or more risky the company that you join, you should expect a lower base salary compared to the market, as the company will balance that out with higher equity on the back end. The larger or more established a company is, you can expect a higher salary compared to market but lower equity. While salary is something you can usually count on, one thing you want to keep in mind is that unless you get promoted, you really can't increase or change your salary. Even when you do get promoted or even change jobs, there is only so high it can go, and on top of that, many large firms in most industries institute or will institute a pay grade or a specific salary pay structure that caps the most you can earn given your role and experience. While we also like to think that your salary will stay consistent forever, there is always that risk of layoffs or the company going under. If there is one thing we learned from 2020 is that no one or no company is truly safe. So while you're enjoying your salary or celebrating a salary increase, make sure you keep the realities in mind. Equity compensation. As we discussed above, when you own a percentage of a company, there is no cap on potential earnings, as literally the sky's the limit compared to salary. Owning a 0.5 or even a 0.005 of a $100 million or $1 billion company can be a complete life changer. It isn't entirely impossible and can happen to you if you want. But there are certain things you have to consider before taking the first equity that is offered to you. When there is a chance for a massive reward, of course there will be risk associated with that as well. First, there's a whole land of complex legal language and jargon that you have to understand to even comprehend all of the aspects of equity and the options. If you can manage to get through all that, don't celebrate too soon, as you'll only get to own all of your options typically after 4 years. So if you think you can join a startup and cash out next year, think again. One of the biggest risks is that, like with salary, nothing is 100% certain, and you can't guarantee that the company you work at will go through a successful exit or liquidity event, and if they don't, the options that you hold will be in a continual holding pattern or limbo state. Not just that, if the startup that you joined for a much lower salary ended up going out of business 12 months later, your equity would essentially vaporize with the company. Even if you're able to cash out on your equity, what you also have to think about, and what is not entirely talked about, is also the tax implication of that. You didn't think the IRS or Uncle Sam would let you walk away from a massive payday without taking their cut, right? There are so many stories where people got in a hole after they paid their taxes on their equity or owed a bunch of taxes even after the price went down after you owned the options. It's so important to exercise your options only at the right time if you truly want to reap the rewards, so it really isn't as easy as you think. Salary or equity? So we talked about the pros and cons of both salary and equity, and now the main question is, what should you do? The short answer is that it's honestly up to you, your personal situation, your preferences, and most importantly, your risk tolerance. Unless you join a small and early startup as a seasoned executive, it's super rare you have a competitive salary and a good amount of equity off the bat. So for the most of us, you really have to choose whether cash or equity is more important to you. If you're okay with risk and fine with a lower salary with more equity, definitely consider small to mid-level startups. Aside from the compensation package, a lot of people join startups because they also have a lot to offer, from office perks, unlimited vacation, casual dress code, team getaways, to offering a lot more opportunities for you to wear multiple hats and have a lot more impact on the business and high-level strategies as a whole. For example, let's say you join a startup as a marketing professional. You could still have the chance to work closely and provide value to the finance, sales, even product team with your complementary skill set if you wanted. Even though typically in a startup your salary may start off lower compared to larger companies, as the startup company continues to do well, raise more funds, and you even get promoted, your salary and overall cash compensation can increase and catch up pretty quickly to market. For this to make sense for you, you just have to be okay with the risk that you could work a couple to several years on a lower salary, knowing that the value of your equity is dependent on the business's growth or exit event. If you can't stomach the added risk and prefer a higher salary and are more comfortable with the lower equity, I would recommend you check check out more mid to large size companies. These companies would have done at least a couple of official fundraising rounds and could be closer to profitability, if not profitable already, depending on their business model. As such, they would be in a better place to pay you a more competitive salary. But because your salary is higher, you would still get equity, but less than if you had joined earlier. Compared to smaller companies, larger companies also typically have more established systems, processes, and rules to follow, so decision making or getting something approved can take a little bit longer. Also, when joining a larger company, you would have less opportunities to wear multiple hats and impact multiple facets of the business, as your role, scope, and responsibilities will be more siloed to your role. As an example, if you join a larger company as a marketing professional, most if not all of your time will be with your greater marketing team, and you would really only have an opportunity to work with other teams if it was part of a collaborative project or initiative. Either way, joining or thinking about joining a tech company can be an exciting experience. As you start talking to different companies and learning more about their compensation package, just make sure you do a thorough pros and cons list of the risk and rewards of both salary and equity that you're going to get. If you're big on equity, just make sure you can afford the extra risk in your life, knowing that the company might not be around in several years. Hedge it by making sure you have ample savings so that if the worst happens, you won't have to be in a super desperate position to getting the next job. If you want the stability of a good salary, look into more established companies and try to get as much information as you can about your role, scope, and growth trajectories. If you also do get equity at a larger established company and you think the company still has so much more potential to grow and exit, that could be a win-win. After all, getting some sort of equity payout is better than none, right? I hope that you enjoyed this video and feel better or more confident in navigating offers from startups. Getting an offer should be an exciting and celebratory experience, and just make sure that before you sign on the dotted line, you understand all of the terms and conditions, because after all, when equity is involved, if the company you joined does super well, you want to make sure you can capitalize on the success by positioning yourself the best that you can. If you have any additional questions or want to share your own experience with equity, please comment below. We'd love to hear from you. As always, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and click that bell. It's completely free and really helps us a lot. If you also want to follow me, feel free to add me on Preston_Park on Instagram, as I try my best to post daily. Thank you so much again, and we'll see you on the next one.